A to the K.
To the K.
To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A to the K Wrestling Show. Joining us today, you may know him as Caleb with a K, having wrestled for Impact, AEW, Ring of Honor, and pretty much everywhere else. It's Caleb Konley. Caleb, thanks for being here, man. How are you?
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks
Doing
for
great.
being
That's it. So what we could do, if you don't mind, is we could start at the top and sort of ask how you ended up in the crazy world of professional wrestling.
Oh man, I've kind of always been in it. Basically since kind of birth. Honestly, my dad was in music business. And Dusty Rhodes, of all people, at the time, was good friends with the band that my dad was a roadie for. And they ended up playing a bunch of stuff with NWA back in the Great American Bash, 85, 86 time. So my dad was just kind of a roadie in a country band, and they were playing all these wrestling shows. And then eventually he decided he wanted to start training, but the music business was, paying the bills. So he just kind of did it as like a side gig kind of thing. And so I've kind of always been around it. And then, time goes on and you play little league football and sports and stuff. And then, probably by the time I started high school, I was like, yeah, I'm going to start doing this for real, and eventually started training. And, here I am now, man.
That's awesome. I mean, as you say, time goes super quick. I mean, you're an absolute vet now. You've been doing it for like nearly 20 years now or something.
18, I think.
18. Wow. So is it 2015? I think you made your debut. We saw you were trained by the likes of George South. So just wondering what was your experience like? I know you had a couple of different trainers. And how cool was it to be able to get back in the ring with George a few years ago?
Yeah, I did try. I trained originally in Atlanta with a guy named Murder One, he did a lot of stuff with New Jack back in the day. They teamed together in like Smoky Mountain for a little bit. He was kind of part of the Gangsters crew. And then with Glacier of WCW fame for a little bit. He had a school in Georgia also. And then about 2 years after I started training and having some matches, I moved to North Carolina to work for High Spots, and that's where George South was. And up until, the pandemic, I was training with George and the High Spots crew every week. Getting to work with him is always fun. I've had some very memorable times on the road with George. One time we did a 4th of July show. I know you guys don't do 4th of July, but here it's a big deal. There's fireworks and everything else. And we had a show at a fair, and right as we were starting to like go out, it started to rain. It was an outside thing. It started to rain. The ring kind of like dipped down a little bit in the middle. So like as it started, like got worse and worse, and it was like ankle deep by the time the match ended. And that was also about the same time as the sun went down and fireworks started. So I'm in the ring in the pouring down, like not pouring down rain at this point, but it's raining. I'm like ankle deep in rain while fireworks are shooting off all at the same time.
Definitely a memorable one.
That's a hell of an experience. So what we're talking about, obviously, your early career, after I think about a year or so in the ring, you were sort of getting in the ring with the likes of Scott Steiner and D'Lo Brown and sort of big names like that. So just wonder
you guys really did some research.
Oh, that's what we try to do, But I just wonder what your thoughts were on sort of being able to get in the ring with sort of the sort of legends and people of that caliber, like so early on in your career. Was that sort of quite an intimidating thing, or
yeah, definitely Scott Steiner. The Scott Steiner one was crazy because when I originally started in Georgia, I lived in a town called Ackworth, Georgia, and I trained not like in the ring, but in a gym. The gym I went to was called Stack's Gym. It was just a little hole in the wall sweatbox gym. But Rick Steiner trained there. Ranger Ross from early WCW trained there. I want to say that way back in the day before I was, wrestling, Brian Pillman used to train there. So like this was like this tiny little gym that like some of the best wrestlers in the world would work out at. And so Scott, obviously, he didn't train there often. I never saw him actually in the gym, but I know that he would be there, every once in a while, and he lived in that area. And I was terrified of Scott because he had a little bit of a reputation of being a wild man. but I knew, I found out that I was wrestling him. I wore the Stacks Gym shirt, and immediately he was like, "Oh, you know Stacks Gym?" And I was like, "Yeah, I train there all the time. I see your brother there." And like, I got in good with him, within just enough time so that he didn't murder me in the ring. So I was very happy about that.
Love it.
So one of our recent guests that we had on was the legendary seamstress Sandra Gray.
Oh wow!
I've watched your documentary on YouTube, Caleb Konley versus Everyone, which is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
But you mentioned in there that you also start making your own ring gear and like turnbuckle pads and everything like that. So how did that kind of come about, and what are some of the favorite pieces you've made?
I don't necessarily make I make like the kick pads and the knee pads, things that are thicker materials. Like actually I've got a Jesse Ventura turnbuckle pad behind me that we're about to do a signing with him in the next week or two. I do like heavier stuff just because well, two things. Heavier stuff because it's a little bit easier for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Spandex just kind of sucks for me personally. Also, every independent professional wrestler can relate to this. At some point in your career, you have been furious at a gear maker for either messing up your stuff or not having it in time or whatever, stealing money from you, whatever the case may be. Someone has had a complaint with a gear maker. Every single wrestler at some point has. So for me, when I got presented the opportunity to start making gear, basically it was learn a new trade at High Spots or get a new job. So I got the new job. I learned the new trade of sewing, but I didn't want to make like gear. I didn't want to make trunks and like the spandex stuff because there's enough things out there for me to get heat on, but I didn't want to show up to a show where I was wrestling and then also have someone mad at me because their trunks didn't fit them.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I have had the opportunity to make a lot of cool stuff. Like, MJF gets knee pads for me all the time. Orange Cassidy. I just made 2 pairs of knee pads for Mark Henry. I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know if that means he's got a match coming up. Maybe he just wants them for personal use. I don't know, but it is pretty cool when I see orders cross my desk and it's like some pretty famous people.
That's awesome. Do you have a particular favorite piece you've made, or?
I just started making the Matt Seidel style kick pads with like the big knee thing on top of it, and it took me a while to learn how to do that. It's a little different process, but I just made like 2 of them today. I got them over on the shelf, and it's just it not all the time. A lot of times I get stuck making kind of the same thing over and over again. But from time to time I get to make some like really cool stuff. Like made some stuff with fur on it or whatever, and that was like the first time I'd ever done that. And nothing sticks out too much, but like the Evan Bourne style, Matt Seidel style kick pads with the big knee thing. There's a name for that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So cool though. So like you can dip into that as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So obviously, moving back into the wrestling side of things, obviously, so 2011 sort of rolls around and you start wrestling with Ring of Honor, but it was just as they announced the end of the company, or at that time anyway. So just wonder what the experience was like, sort of with Ring of Honor and sort of that sort of happening so quickly.
Ring of Honor was pretty cool. Like the experience was very brief. That when I got into wrestling, in 2005, Ring of Honor was gigantic for me. I mean, it might not have been like the biggest thing, but for me, like that was like the ultimate goal. Like those were like the best wrestlers in the world. Were your Punk, your Daniel, all your guys that are at the top of AEW now, they were all there. Hero and Claudio and the Briscoes and all those guys, and like those are guys I really looked up to, and those are really guys I wanted to be around. And so I just started, kind of basically they told me show up and help with the ring, and maybe you'll get a dark match and whatever. And it ended up working out. My first time actually at a Ring of Honor show was in Manassas, Virginia. It had to have been like January or February or something, because there was a giant snowstorm that happened beforehand, like during the show. So I get there, we set up the ring. I'm in a 6-man tag. I can't remember who my partners were, but I know the Bravados. Andre Chase from NXT was one of my opponents, and Dempsey was the other guy. Yeah, the Bravados and Dempsey were my opponents. And then the match happened. The match went good. the show's ending, massive snowstorm. And then we've got all the trainees at the time were helping take down the ring. And this particular venue was like I want to say like an indoor soccer stadium. So they had like plywood all over, like on top of the grass, the fake grass field. So we had to take all the plywood off the entire field for it. And then I ended up getting like stuck in the parking lot because of the snowstorm. And I spent like an hour, at least an hour, getting from the venue to the highway, which was probably only a couple miles. And then I ended up having to I just randomly had to get a hotel because I could not literally drive. And then I had to go to like the other side of Virginia the next day for another indie show, and I couldn't make it because I was just snowed out. It was terrible, but the experience was good. Ring of Honor. After that point, I don't know what happened. I did several shows. I did like one in, where was it? I don't know, New York, but I did the California WrestleCon shows that year. And then I went to Japan for a month at 01, and I came back right in time for WrestleMania. And I did the WrestleMania in Atlanta show one night, and I think there was miscommunication because I think I was supposed to be booked the next night, but no one told me or something. And then, that was the last time I worked for Ring of Honor. I don't really know what happened, but it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah,
the WrestleMania show was really fun.
Yeah, I'll bet. I also love the fact that you like, wrestling in all weathers, rain, snow.
Yeah,
just
really, the weather is a big part of this interview already. I didn't even realize.
So you mentioned obviously Japan. You also spent a lot of time with Evolve as well. So you're part of the Premier Athlete brand with the likes of Brian Cage and Tony Nese. What was that experience like? And is there a chance we might see you, with Tony Nese again as part of the Varsity Athletes?
Oh man, I would love to be with Tony Nese. When I started with Evolve, it was the same thing. It was a kind of it was right after the Ring of Honor thing happened. 2011 also. I just kind of started showing up, and Gabe, he kind of liked me, but like he couldn't figure out what he wanted to do with me. He didn't know if I fit in with the Evolve look. He said I was too Southern. And then I went out there and I bought a whole bunch of new clothes, and I did something stupid with my hair, which I continue to do, obviously, because I got stupid bleach blonde hair now. But I went and I straightened it, and I had blonde streaks in it. And then he put me with a guy named Scott Reed, and we did the scene, and it was different. It definitely wouldn't get greenlit in today's world. We were making out with girls and doing sexual poses and all kinds of stupid stuff. But it got me a spot on the company, and I was a regular at Evolve for a long time. And then after that, it was me and Tony Nese and Trent Beretta, for the most part, is the Premier Athlete brand with SoCal Val. Mm-hmm. And that was some of the funnest times I had ever had, because Tony is he's such a natural athlete. It was cool to get to work with him. And at the same time, we had a street fight with Rich Swann and Johnny Gargano. We were working Ricochet. We were wrestling like the Dragon Gate USA or the Dragon Gate Japan guys. Just a whole lot of fun. We had a 4-way in another weather story here. We had when me and Tony won the Dragon Gate USA tag titles. It was like a 4-way tag in this little place in Brooklyn, New York. It was basically like it was like a 3-story kind of building, but we were in the basement of it basically. And it had leaked. Like the top above us was an old, like super old school roller skating place. And then maybe there was something else, maybe just like a restaurant or something. But then we were in the basement, and it was raining this day, and it was another just ankle deep of water all around the building, and there wasn't really a locker room. We just kind of had a tarp off in the corner that we were getting changed in, and we're sloshing around. The match went really fun. I remember it was me and Tony. I think the Bravados again, obviously, and then Swan and Fox, and then maybe it was a 3-way. I don't remember. Maybe a 4-way. But the funniest thing, the whole building didn't have electricity. The whole building was being lit off of car batteries. I remember going up a stairwell and looking behind something, and there was just 10 car batteries all stacked together, linked up, and that was what was running the electricity on the entire building. Wow. such a shady little place. It was super fun. It was like being in a fight club, like in a basement. Just these grungy,
I'm getting that
people
image,
like
actually.
chanting at you.
Car batteries and water, though. It sounds like a
Yeah, it was.
lethal
We
combo.
could have all died.
Thankfully, that wasn't the case.
That's it. So obviously moving over to roughly 2016, I think it was, you signed with Impact Wrestling. Started making a name for yourself in the X division. So just wondering sort of what was going through your mind when you signed with Impact, and sort of what your experience was like in the X division, which is obviously quite a name thing for Impact, really.
It was pretty awesome. Like similar to the experience with Ring of Honor, it was kind of like when I first started wrestling. Ring of Honor was awesome. Those were the top guys. And then like the X division, those guys, it was, a lot of those guys were the same guys going back and forth from one another. When I was in high school, even like living in Georgia, at that point, TNA was running the Wednesday pay-per-views in Nashville. And that's like a 3.5-hour drive from where I lived. I think they were on Wednesday nights. Me and my buddy, Bobby Moore, who I trained with originally, we would drive up there almost all, like I would up for like a couple months straight. Me and him would leave school early on Wednesdays, drive to Nashville, watch the show. It'd always be the greatest show we'd ever seen. And then like we'd come home like that night. And that was like a monthly thing as like a 16, 17-year-old to do, which I don't even know if my parents knew where I was going. we just dipped out and went. So to actually get there and sign with TNA was I don't know. It just seemed like something that would never happen for me. I don't know. I never expected it. They had actually, when did I sign? It was 2016 when I signed. Like the year before that, I want to say I had just re-signed my Evolve contract. And like the day after I signed, that was when TNA was doing the gut check stuff still. And they asked me about coming down and doing that. And I was like, I literally just signed a contract yesterday. So then they told me like, hey, when a contract ends, let us know. We'll get you down here. We'll get you a tryout, whatever. The tryouts went good, obviously, because they signed me. And then, I did eventually get to do some X Division stuff, but that was like, it felt like forever. I felt like I got signed. I had like 2 or 3 matches, and then I just sat at home for like 6 months just waiting for an opportunity, which is the most frustrating thing in the world, especially like when you're like, you're ready to go, like you sign this contract, it's going to be a life-changing thing for you, and then like it's just wait some more.
Yeah,
but eventually the ball started rolling. So
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a vicious rumor you may or may not have portrayed suicide during your time at Impact. So if hypothetically that was true,
that is a rumor. I have heard that from time to time.
Yeah.
Now I've never met the guy personally, but I know that he was pretty stoked to come back in 2016, 2017.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, he came back with a really good look as well.
A lot of that to Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, so I don't know how to phrase. So hypothetically, so I've got a kind of 2-part question. Kind of, whose idea was it to bring Suicide back, and especially with that awesome new look, and also what are the differences of kind of wrestling with and without a mask? If you've ever done that before.
Jeff Jarrett is completely to blame for Suicide returning. He's probably to blame for all of the Suicide stuff. Honestly, I don't know. Is just hanging out at home, waiting on an opportunity to fucking come my way. And, they had me under contract. And then eventually I was like, I got a call one day and they said, do you want to do this? And I go, do I get to wrestle on TV? And I said, so yeah, I want to do it. So it was cool. It at times seemed directionless, but at the same time, because of Suicide, I got to wrestle in Australia, and I got a couple tours of England out of it. I got to wrestle in India for Impact. Like, I got to see a whole lot of the world because of this dumb masked outfit character guy.
That's awesome. So while we're talking about Suicide, obviously there's a few instances where both obviously your good self and Suicide wrestled on the same night. So I just wonder what it's like, sort of having to pull double duty, as it were.
He always does seem to show up exactly where I am.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's weird.
It's weird. uh, how do I phrase it? It sucked at first. I felt like at certain points at Impact when it first started happening, it was almost as if it was a rib on me. If they were doing it just to see how much they could make me endure. But on the other side of that, it was cool to have a challenge, and it may suck to have to bump that much sometimes in a day, but on the other side of it, man, my cardio was through the roof. I could go forever. You couldn't blow it up to save your life.
No. I mean, I suppose as well, like playing a baby face and a heel at the same kind of time must have been an interesting slant on it as well.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to remember who you are at certain times. And I like, how do I act right now? Oh, I'm not supposed to do that. I got to do this over here. Like, it gets a little bit. I mean, it's like watching Spider-Man movie, like whatever. He's got to be Peter Parker, and he's got to be Spider-Man. He's got to be different, and so people don't know who's who. Like, it takes a little getting used to, but eventually you figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you went on to kind of form a tag team with Trevor Lee. What was it like teaming with him? And what do you make of his success as Cameron Grimes now?
I've known Trevor. I can't remember how much younger than me he is, but he's several years younger, and I've known him since he was probably, I want to say, like 16 or something. Him and Andrew Everett both trained together originally in the same area, and they were both just children at the time. And I remember them playing in the ring and bumping around, but they were both excellent right away. They both grew up around the business. They both excelled. Trevor especially, because he's got that like factor where he just won't stop until he gets everything right and he does better. So like, the fact that he does as well now as he does is not surprising. I mean, you could have seen it years ago. Everyone kind of knew that he was going to kill it. When he first started with Impact and stuff, it was pretty surprising because I think he was only like 18 or something. But he's a monster in the ring. He was a bit of a selfish prick at some points when we were teaming, but he has since grown out of it, and we get along really well. He's still one of my best friends in the business to this day, and nothing that he does surprise. I mean, he surprises me because he's always great, but the fact that he does great never surprises me because he's always been great.
It's awesome. So you also portrayed Caleb with a K, the personal photographer of Tennille Dashwood.
Yes.
So I was just wondering sort of who came up with that gimmick and what were your thoughts about sort of portraying that new role?
I'm pretty sure that was Robert Evans, the writer for Impact. I think he came up with that. It was right when the COVID taping started happening, and I had been back for a few months, or supposedly I had been back under a mask for a few months, and then I didn't get a booking email when the next set of tapings was coming out, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, we don't have anything for you this month. And I was like, oh, well, okay, I guess what am I going to do? And then like 2 days later, they called me and pitched this really weird idea that I didn't know what to think about. And they said I was going to be a photographer, and my name was still going to be Caleb, but they were going to spell it with a K now. And I go, well, can't I just be Caleb with a C since that's what I am? And they're like, nope, you got to be Caleb, but with a K. That's going to be your name. And Robert, I didn't talk to Robert until like we started doing it. Jimmy Jacobs was the person who called me, and he pitched it to me. And again, it was the same thing as Suicide. And I was like, well, do I get to be on TV and do this? Do I get to work for the company? And they said, yeah. So I said, then sign me up. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I honestly, Tennille had been off TV for several months at that point. I don't know if she was injured or if it was just like a COVID scare thing, but she wasn't at the first couple COVID tapings. So she'd been off TV, and they wanted to do kind of switch her character up a little bit. I think they just kind of wanted to use me as something to help her along in the beginning. I don't think they had any long-term plans. I think it was only going to be like a 1 or 2 month thing. The idea was very open. Like it was just kind of you're going to be Caleb with a K and you're going to kind of be a dork. But like everything that I did was me just making the call on my own, like how I wanted to dress or like how over the top, what are the ideas we're going to have, me using the phone and the fanny pack and all of the things that I did were just, it was kind of me making fun of other people on the roster, honestly, a little bit. Like a lot of the outfits were just inspired by like what Moose would show up to TV wearing, or Jimmy Jacobs had a very certain way of dressing, you know, in the locker room. And I would just kind of like, that shirt I kind of like, and the necklaces, I kind of get that. It's kind of funny. I'll just wear it myself and put it on TV. So that's kind of where like all that kind of stuff came from. And it was same as Suicide. Like it was completely out of left field. It was completely something that I wasn't used to doing. And I hadn't thought of maybe being this, but it was a cool, like from an actor's standpoint, it was kind of like just making sure I wasn't, you know, stereotyping or like, what do you call it? Like typecasting myself as the same person over and over again. It's kind of cool to be something completely different and just kind of start from scratch, you know, like sometimes as a wrestler, you're like, well, this is who I am. It's kind of who I am defined. And like, it's hard to like stray from the normal path, but this is kind of like a new start. Like I can just kind of do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So I mean, ultimately, you did decide to leave Impact. You know, what was kind of the thought process behind your decision?
Well, it wasn't my decision, to be honest with you guys. I'm gonna tell you, Scott D'Amore, probably never coming back after this. Scott D'Amore didn't want me to be a wrestler. It was fine with the Suicide stuff, I guess. But there were a couple instances where they would put me in the ring and I would have a match and I would do well, or I would bump for a girl. I was doing some kind of a run-in and one of the girls, I think Nevaeh, DT'd me and I took a really good spike bump on it. The next day I got kind of yelled at for bumping too well. And then like a month later, I got put into a match with Jake something and we had a pretty good match and the producer was happy with it. And the crowd, this was finally when we had a crowd again, the crowd was happy with it. And then I watched it on TV and they had cut out all my stuff. And then I got a call the next day from the producer and I was told that I was in trouble for the match we had. It is not what they wanted. So little things like that continued to happen. And then eventually they just said, we're not going to use you anymore. Now, a lot of that might have had to do with every girl that I was in an angle with at the time that I left, also left very shortly after me. I think they knew that was going to happen and maybe they just wanted to write me off before they wrote them off. But yeah, it wasn't my decision at all, for sure. I really, as stupid as it sounds, I did want to be a wrestler and I wanted to prove to them that I could have good matches on TV and still be this character. They saw otherwise. But I did really enjoy being Caleb with a K. It was just fun to be someone completely different. And I really wish it would have went longer because like the last few months with the Iconics and the Influence stuff, that like they had a lot of storyline. That story was going to go on for a much longer and it was going to be way crazier and I was going to get to do all kinds of fun stuff and I was like super looking forward to it. Then it all just went away.
Yeah, well, I absolutely loved the stuff you were doing with with the Iconics, and so it's crazy on their part.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of really sorry to hear that. I didn't realize it sort of played out that way. It is like you say, it's a real shame.
Stuff like that happens to wrestlers all the time. I'm sure there's plenty of guys come in here and tell their stories, and you know they're not always happy. But like, it wasn't my decision to leave. You know, there was a lot of guys that left around the same time, and a lot of those were, you know, financial disputes and whatnot. They wanted more money or whatever it may have been, and then they left. Mine was just they were tired of me, I guess. So.
I mean, obviously, you've talked about working with the Iconic. I think the inspiration when they were in Impact, and obviously you've done a lot of work in sort of the intergender matches, and it's one thing that we've discussed with a few guests in the past. Like notably, one of the people we spoke to was like Thunder Rosa, for example, who was saying that like, well, you know, from a female perspective, they train with male wrestlers, so that for them, you know, or for her anyway, it was like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we have intergender matches? So I just wanted to sort of, if you're okay with it, just get your thoughts
Sure.
on intergender wrestling, and whether you think that is something that the larger promotions should really embrace a bit more and do a bit more of.
Uh, it's hard to say, man. It's a double-edged sword. You know as well as I do the way that society is right now. The idea of a
Mm,
guy hitting a girl is definitely looked down upon in the real world.
mm,
So it's really rough to like turn on the TV, especially if you're not like a wrestling fan, if you're just flipping channels, or if you're a mom who just walks in and sees their 10-year-old son watching this of some big muscle bound dude beating the crap out of a girl. It's a
yeah,
little weird. On the other end of it, if you're a wrestling fan, you realize it's just entertainment, and it's the same as watching Avengers movie and watching Black Widow fight, whoever or whatever girl fight another guy. Like, so it's a double-edged sword. Personally, I had always enjoyed doing the intergender stuff at Impact and even on the Indies. Sometimes it can be bad. I've been to 100 shows and there's an intergender match and it's just completely done wrong. And I think if a dude is just mercilessly beating a woman up the whole time, it kind of takes you out of it. I think you can, if you're smart enough and you know how to work a match right, you can make a match with a girl be very interesting and entertaining, and it can be realistic even at times, and it can be everything it's supposed to be. So I think like done right, I think intergender wrestling is great and it's a lot of fun. And I got to work with Influence and Madison and Tennille obviously, and a whole bunch of other girls. Or I had a match with what's her name? What's her name? I had a bunch of different intergender matches, and I enjoyed all of them. I thought they were put together well, and I have much respect for all of the girls at Impact.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, as I do take your point. That's a lot of the time it's sort of how you put that match together and how that story is told, I suppose, as to how
Yeah,
it's
it's
received. Yeah.
it's wrestling is always storytelling, and especially in the intergender stuff. Well, not just especially. It's all wrestling at its best is a great story. So if you
Yeah.
tell a great story with intergender, then it can be a great story.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
I think one of ours that of yours that we've seen is obviously you and Kris for Limitless Wrestling. And as you say, that was so well put together. There was a lot of back and forth, and obviously she ended up taking the win there as well. What was it like wrestling Kris?
Kris is awesome. She's my favorite wrestler to watch. That match with her was one of my favorite matches I've ever had to this day. Um, the story with her is a little different than most stories because she can legit beat my ass. So it's a little bit different because I have to go hard on her because she can kill me. She's the most determined. She lifts almost as much as me. She's in the gym more than I am. She's just a murderer and she deserves everything she's getting. And from the first day I ever saw her, I knew that she was going to be a giant star. And she got hurt the first time and she was very, self-conscious about her place in the company. And I go, don't worry, your time's coming. You're the best out here. You're going to get everything you deserve. She started to make a comeback. Second knee injury happens again. She's very worried about her position in the company. She's very hard on herself all the time. That's why she works so hard. And I just kept telling her, it's going to be okay. You're going to come back. You're going to kill it. And, night one of her comeback, she becomes TBS champion. So
yeah.
I texted her as soon as it happened, before she even probably got back through the curtain. I said, I told you from day one, you're going to be a megastar.
I mean that was an awesome moment. Obviously, ending Jade Cargill's undefeated streak as well. Like how big of a moment was that for her when obviously you've sort of interacted with her after that? Was that I mean, obviously she was I suppose it was booked, so she was expecting it to happen. But how big a moment was that for her?
It was crazy. Like it was,
Yeah.
like for 9 months, she was basically at home recovering and, doing all the things she's supposed to do. She's working out the way she's supposed to. She's going to the rehab, and she's just waiting and waiting and waiting. And she's still coming to TVs, and she's watching the product there, and she's seeing everything, and she's doing all the right things. And it's just like the culmination of just 9 months of anticipating and waiting. And, she's back, and she's better than ever. And she's just like, it was just like the perfect cap of like, boom, there it is.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, speaking of AEW, obviously with Rampage and now Collision, they have announced the cancellation of Dark and Elevation, which obviously, you were on quite a few of the shows. What were your thoughts when you found out Dark was coming to an end?
It was wrestling on YouTube. It was super cool. It was super cool, and I enjoyed all my time there, and all the matches I had, I thought were pretty good. I was happy with all of it. Like, it's wrestling. They've got another show on TV, and then they got a Ring of Honor show also on the Honor Club. So like, how many wrestling shows can one company have at the same time? Like, not only from like a viewer perspective, but like from the perspective of the talent that has to fly back and forth. Like, I know I was at one of the Dark tapings, and then it was like guys had just left from TV across the country and had to fly to Florida to do the taping. And then they I think like the next day there was a signing somewhere else, and a whole bunch of the guys were on the signing in New Jersey in the morning. So they had to leave straight from there. And it's just like, do we really need these other shows? I think they were putting like, I get it in the beginning. It was probably great for them to, have another place to work or whatever. Like, maybe some guys aren't getting used on TV regularly enough, so this is giving them a good spot. But for other people, like especially with Collision coming up and then the Ring of Honor shows too, like there's only so much traveling you can do. That's terrible. I mean, it's not good for your body. So just flying back and forth, and it's not like territory days where you would, kind of like, I'm going here, and then the next day I'm here, and the next day I'm here, and a couple hours down the road, they're just ping ponging all across the country.
Yeah, no, I get that. So obviously, one of the other companies you've wrestled for is actually Fantasy Super Cosplay Wrestling. I think I've said that right.
FSCW. I'm wearing the shirt right now.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously, you're the current FSCW champion, if I'm not mistaken, and
yes,
you actually portray Star-Lord. So I just wondered sort of what it's like working for that promotion with that sort of gimmick, I suppose. And was Star-Lord your choice?
It wasn't my choice. I have no idea whose choice it was. There was a couple guys that were running the company when I got there. They kind of left and went into other things. There's a guy named Alex Chamberlain who is still there. He might have had something to do with it, but I knew a lot of the people on FSCW beforehand. Serpentico was there a lot. Obviously Diamante was there. She's also the women's champion there now. It was something that I would just see on Facebook. Like Leva Bates would do it a lot. I would see these guys that were, wrestling as Deadpool and, Japanese animation characters and all this stuff. And I'd see it on Facebook, like they were my friends on Facebook. I'm like, man, that seems like a really fun show. I'd love to be a part of that. And, a couple of years of that went by, and then eventually I heard they were gonna be running a con in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is 2.5, 3 hours from me. And I hit them up and I was like, dude, I really want to be a part of this. I think it'd be really cool. They put me on. I had, some good matches. I had never even seen Guardians of the Galaxy at this point. I had no idea who Star-Lord was. I didn't know anything about it. So then I watched the movie, like just the first movie was out at this point. So I watched that. And then I watched a couple of the matches that went on. I was later on in the card, and I was kind of like getting a feel for how it was. And I was like, man, this is so much fun. And then I got out there and I started doing the stupid Star-Lord dance, and the crowd's going crazy. And it was like, I just fell in love all over again. Like, sometimes you go through ruts in wrestling where it's kind of like you're doing the same thing, and it's kind of like stressful. And it's like, man, I'm doing all this and I feel like I'm doing good work, but I'm not really getting anywhere. And then I went out that night, and the crowd was awesome. It was insane crowds. There was 1,000. There's been times where the Florida one where they would have 2,000 people inside of a ballroom, and there would be another 400 trying to get in the door. They'd have to open up the fake walls. and just those shows are always fun. They're crowd interactive. They're everything that I kind of want wrestling to be. Like, you can be as serious as you want to be. You can be as funny as you want to be. Your matches can, you can do all the cool high flying, high spots you want to do if you want to do it, but you got to make it work within the bounds of your character, who, again, like KALEB WITH A K or Suicide or any other character I may or may not do ever in my life. Like, it's completely different. And it's just like another, like, hey, let's go out there and do something completely off the walls and different.
Yeah, I'm curious, who would you have chosen if the choice was up to you?
They've asked me recently, because they're going to start doing some horror conventions also.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
So they want to have like maybe possibly horror themed ones. When I showed up with blonde hair like this, they asked me to do Homelander. I thought that would be pretty cool. I think I just do Cody Rhodes moves. I just wrestle as Cody Rhodes.
Love it.
I would possibly be one of the Droogs from Clockwork Orange. I think that would be something cool. With the horror stuff, they had talked about me being what's his name, Kiefer Sutherland from The Lost Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So I think that might be. I was also pitched they wanted to do a Scooby-Doo team to face a bunch of goblins, and I'd be Fred, obviously.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty cool too.
That's awesome. So as we said, like 18 years, man, that's a hell of a career, and you've been in the ring with like the who's who of wrestling. Jeff Hardy, obviously from your documentary, Drew McIntyre, Rey Mysterio. The list goes on. Who've been some of your most favorite to get in the ring with? It's a tough question.
Yeah, pick a favorite.
Ray. I mean, all those guys you named were amazing. I really liked wrestling with PJ Black. I think I got to wrestle his first match on the Indies after he got released. I think if it wasn't his first, it was one of his first. I definitely wrestled Matt Stryker in his first match on the Indies. I've been really lucky. Like, every once in a while, someone will throw out like a name of like, "Hey, didn't you wrestle this guy?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so." And then I'll think about it for a while. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did get to wrestle that guy." Like, so like the Rey Mysterio was, honestly, man, of anybody my age, I was a WCW cruiserweight guy. That's who I looked up to. I remember that whole cruiserweight tournament with Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko and all those great matches. So like, to be in the ring with legit one of the greatest to ever do it, Rey Mysterio, like, man, like, yeah, butterflies in my stomach. Not to mention he had like, we were in New York or Connecticut or wherever it was we were at, he had a bunch of friends show up. So he's hanging out with his friends. Then it's intermission and he's signing autographs, and I haven't even seen him yet. I'm fucking terrified. I'm just like, oh my God, we're main event. We gotta go there and kill it. I haven't even seen this guy. And then like, he gets back to the locker room, but then he's talking to his buddy who's just there, and he's like playing with his little kid. And I'm just going, "Excuse me, sir, can I please talk to you about this match we're supposed to have?" And then we went out there, and it was honestly one of my favorite matches. Again, like Drew McIntyre, I got to wrestle him a bunch of times. I think it was because a lot of people didn't like working him because he will beat the crap out of you. He's legit the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. And this was not like, he wasn't trying to be mean or anything. He's just such a big brute of a person. I remember hitting him like in the face with a punch, and he's like, "Hit me harder, man. Like, stop being a pussy." I'm hitting you as hard as I can, and you won't even budge.
That's awesome.
He's a brick wall.
Yeah. He looks like one, to be fair as well. So is there anyone you've sort of not had the chance to get in the ring with yet that maybe on like your sort of bucket list, as it were?
I don't know, man. Like, when before Evolve and before Ring of Honor, I was doing a lot of FIP stuff. And Seth Rollins, Tyler Black at the time was there a bunch, and he's another guy, like, you kind of just knew from the beginning that he was going to be a huge star, and he was on a bunch of those shows, and I remember watching him then, and like, he had a little bit of name value, but this is even before like the show he had on MTV. Like, this is before any of that stuff. So he was just like, he was a good dude, but he wasn't like a name yet. And like I'd always want to be in a match with him. So like Seth Rollins would definitely be like, and now I mean he's almost the top guy in the company. So like it's probably never going to happen. But at the time, like I felt like I had a lot of opportunities at that point where I was going to wrestle him, and then it just never got to happen. That was like a guy that was the one that got away, kind of.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So obviously we've seen you're always giving back to the next generation, obviously with wrestling training and helping out there and stuff. And I believe you've had a hand in training the likes of Big Swole and people like that. So is running your own school or, kind of helping with running schools something you see yourself doing down the line?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I want to be involved any way I can. Like, obviously I'm making gear and I'm going to expand on that. I've been trying to like learn how to make the boots. So I want to be involved that way. I'm very interested in the last little bit of working for Impact. I was kind of like helping out Madison, not really, but a little bit, help her produce stuff. Like that would be something that I would want to get more into, and definitely the training aspect. Like, man, I train Cedric Alexander a whole bunch, Big Swole. There's a guy who keeps popping up, a big mass dude named Noel, who he was doing a lot of dark stuff. Train him. Lucky Ali, who's doing great stuff at DPW and a whole bunch of other places. Like he's going to be another big top guy. Got another, just we've had a whole bunch of really good students come through, and I would love to. High Spots hasn't had a school in about a year and a half now, but if something changes or if the right opportunity comes along, I would love to get back to training every week. It was, is one of those things I might have taken for granted a little bit at the time. Like I loved doing it when I got back from Japan in 2011. I really wanted to start doing that because that was like, it was the hardest training I've ever had. We do it every day, and it would like almost puke every day, but like it felt so good after it was done to like complete that, and just to know that I was that much, like I felt like I grew so much as a wrestler in that time period. So I always want to bring that back and give that to the students here, because a lot of in the South, like a lot of the training wasn't like in Japan. Like it's not that way a lot of places, it seems like, but like, man, we were doing so many squats and push-ups and running the ropes and just getting the crap beat out of us by like, we had pancrase guys that would come in and roll with us, and they were tapping me out every 5 seconds. So like, yeah, being a trainer was definitely something that going forward and 5, 10, 15 years down the road, I would love to still be doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, lastly from us, we just have to ask. Obviously, you'll be turning 40 in August, I believe.
That is so wrong. I'm turning 37. The Wikipedia
Age do so many.
That's what I get for relying on the internet.
Screwed me over.
Need to get that edited.
I keep trying to get that changed. I don't know how to do it. I've had other people ask. I was born in 86, not 83.
Apologies, didn't mean to age
That's
you
all
up
right,
there.
man.
So basically, what I was leading to is sort of what your goals are for for the next 12 to 18 months for yourself.
Well, I don't know. I think more AEW stuff is probably in the future. I would like to travel some more. I would love to get back to England. I had a great time there in 2017, 2018-ish when I was there a couple times. Traveling, just having fun, having good matches. I've been on a real kick lately where it's, I think when I was during the Caleb with a K stuff, I was having fun at TV doing the stuff, and even the matches I had there were fun. But sometimes the company that I would be working for on the independents would not really care for the idea of me being a goofball with a camera and a fanny pack, and they didn't appreciate that. So then I would have to I felt like I'd have to go extra hard on their shows to show them that I could still be a good wrestler and be a weird character. Yeah. And at some points it got stressful to like have to overcompensate kind of. Yeah. But here lately, I'm just kind of going with the flow and having fun, good matches that I feel like I'm helping myself and my opponent reach potential and get over with the crowd and do the necessary things. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'm hoping to just continue this positive outlook of mine. That's a very new thing for me, and just keep on rolling with that.
Awesome.
And whatever
Honestly,
happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Caleb, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before we let you go, just let everyone know how to kind of stay up to date with yourself, and obviously your new merch as well, designed by our friend of the show, Alt Wrestling Tees.
Yes. That's a great shirt. I love it. He just hit me up and was like, "Hey, do you need anything?" And then I saw some of his other stuff, and I was like, "Dude, you look like exactly who I need to design my new stuff." And he's been a pleasure to work with. You can find me online at Caleb Konley, basically everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I've got shows coming up throughout the Southeast. Also, I will be appearing in a couple episodes of Heels on Stars. I don't know if you guys get that in England. Do you get that?
Yeah, we get it. Well, I mean, we don't get Stars, but I've seen the first season, so we get it somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the second season starts at the end of July, and you will see my face a couple times in there. So catch me on that, doing 450 splashes and whatnot.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, we look forward to seeing you there. We look forward to seeing you over in the UK again soon as well. And
Thank
thank you
to,
so
man.
much, man.
Thank you
Thanks
guys
for
for
taking the
having
time.
me.